Hello and welcome to the Villarreal Update, a podcast by Villarreal USA. Now we're going to be doing much more video content across this season and beyond. So I'll just take a moment to explain how we're going to go about doing that. We'll have the Villarreal Update on Twitter, which will be the kind of average 2-minute videos, kind of shorter form stuff that you can grab on the go. But we'll also be doing this kind of longer form video where we discuss different things, and hopefully we'll get the whole team involved along the way, and hopefully some special guests as well. But for today, you're stuck with just me. It's the summer holidays, so people are away at this time of year, despite the season kicking off now in just around a week's time. So yeah, we're just discussing some of the summer transfers today, the standout ones. And in fact, I thought we'd go through the full list of transfers, as we've recently put a thread together on Villarreal USA's Twitter account. So just to chat through some of the business Villarreal have done this summer and where they might need to do more business before the transfer window shuts. We'll kick off with Brereton-Diaz, a transfer we all knew was coming weeks before it actually happened. He went out of contract with Blackburn Rovers in the Championship and was a little bit in demand. I think it's fair to say he could have gone to a Premier League club, I think, this summer, but ended up choosing Villarreal. I think largely because he wants to kind of expand his Spanish brand. Obviously, an English-born player who represents Chile internationally. Is learning Spanish. I think he needs to step up that, as he's recently admitted now that he's going to kick on with learning Spanish. And what better way than to live in Spain and work with Spanish teammates, work in Spanish every day. I'm sure it'll click for him pretty quickly. And he's already up and going with the goals in pre-season. I think this is an impressive signing for me because he's one of the rare players who is a genuine backup for Gerard Moreno. Now, I'm not saying he's as good as Gerard Moreno, but he's exactly that kind of player. Technically good. He could play up front, but probably prefers to play a little bit wider so he can cut in and cause problems that way. I think he can play alongside Gerard Moreno, certainly. I think Gerard will play in a more central role and Brereton-Diaz wide. But the two players should complement each other, and not only complement each other, but if Gerard suffers more injuries, I think Ben can be the right kind of replacement that Villarreal have been lacking in recent years. So an impressive signing, and especially when you consider he's arriving for free as well, albeit, of course, we have to include wages and whatnot, but no transfer fee involved in that one. Santi Comisano was another free transfer, another smart one as well. He arrived on a free deal from Rayo Vallecano. An impressive season from him last season. A player who really holds down the fort in the holding midfield role. And again, a smart signing for Villarreal based on the fact that Etienne Capoue is not getting any younger. He's been excellent for Villarreal over the last couple of years, but he's a player that Villarreal need to replace long term. They need to replace the probably most of the midfield, with the exception of Alex Baena. Parejo's getting no younger, and Trigueros obviously is a little past it and will be playing a supplementary role from here on in. So, Comisano, a very smart signing, another player who deserves to be playing in the top six and that kind of area. So, a good signing, a nice fit for both there. And Dennis Suarez, another one I think is a player who will play more of a supplementary role. He finished the season pretty well with Espanyol last season. He left Celta Vigo before that, of course, Celta Vigo, and had played with Villarreal previously. So a return for him, one that makes sense based on the fact he's free, and I think it would have been made sense as well, even if it was just a cheap transfer fee. Dennis obviously quite comfortable at Villarreal, and should slot in nicely and add depth to the squad, something Villarreal lacking in even now, I would say. Elias as well, another free incoming from Barcelona. Initially, we'll link up with the B team to see how he goes, but I think he's one of those we could see, like a player we'd come on to, Ramon Terrats. I think he's a player who will probably feature in the first team a couple of times through this year, and perhaps he'll break into the first team on a more permanent basis as the season goes on. So initially he'll join the B team, still a young player, but a talented player. And again, a player who had other options. I think he agreed to deal with Leeds initially before they parted ways with Victor Orta, the sporting director. So Villarreal stepped in and took advantage there. And it'll be interesting to see what Elias offers going forward. And I think maybe we'll have to wait to see the best of him. But it's a smart signing for Villarreal long term as they look for a replacement for Samu Chukwueze, another player we'll come on to a little bit later. Let's switch to an outgoing, and Nicolas Jackson, one of the big ones. He left for Chelsea on a €37 million euro deal. Chelsea continuing their huge spending. Jackson finished last season stupendously, absolutely brilliant run of form, couldn't stop scoring. We hadn't seen consistent Jackson before then. I wouldn't say flashes of good play, and he had some injuries, of course. Could have gone in January before a move fell through with Southampton and Bournemouth interested at the time. Um, but yeah, I think this is it's disappointing to lose Jackson, no doubt about it. But I think it's a fair transfer fee for Villarreal to get based on the fact that we haven't seen a consistent player over a long period of time. So a decent deal, I think, even if it feels a bit early to be losing Jackson. And on to more sad news. Pau Torres, of course, a disappointing departure for Villarreal, but one we knew would come at some point. He left on a 33 million euro deal. I think it feels a little bit cheap for me. Pau Torres has proven that he's a very high caliber player. Centre back with other options, Bayern Munich, etc., have been interested in the past. Manchester United as well. I think just the way it played out, the timing of it, with Manchester United going elsewhere, like getting Lisandro Martinez last year, for example, and Varane before that, and a couple of other teams have already landed central targets. I mean, Min Jae as well was available this year for Bayern, so it just hasn't quite shaken out to power. He could land a bigger club, but it makes sense for him to go with Unai Emery, and it gives me confidence that he will be a success to be linking up with a manager who truly believes in him. So I think that's a good thing if we can pick out the positives. But it felt a little bit cheap to see him go for 33 million. Even so, he goes with the blessing of Villarreal, of course, a club legend at this stage, and the man's got a training ground named after him, and he did such great things with his boyhood club, and hopefully we'll see him down the road at some point. Bulaya Diaz, another one that brought in a little windfall, 12 million euros. Salamitana, the team, I got to say that right, but 12 million euros. They activated a buyout, an option to buy clothes after his loan deal. And yeah, it's disappointing not to have seen more of Diaz. I think there was quite a bit of excitement when we signed him at Villarreal, but just didn't see the best of him. Emery didn't quite believe in what he had to offer, and then there was no real option for him to return under Setien last season. And now the option to buy, of course, has been activated. There's not much Villarreal were going to do about that, especially having not seen the best of him. They weren't going to fight to keep him really when that money was there to be taken. So I think some disappointment from some fans, but not the end of the world. And one fans are probably more pleased about Arnaud Danjuma heading out on loan to Everton, a 4.2 million euro loan fee, which is pretty good. I think Danjuma has brought in around 6 or 7 million worth of loan fees so far, given he was at Tottenham last season. Obviously, we saw some good performances from Danjuma in his first season, but he got a bit carried away after that, a bit excited and a bit overconfident, if you like. Villarreal not too impressed with his belief that he should be playing at a higher level. And it hasn't quite shaken out for him, you have to say. He played for Tottenham, well, didn't play much for Tottenham last season, I should say. And now he joins an Everton side who were struggling with relegation till the very end, the last day of the season of last season. So, yeah, well, not even a sideward step. He's actually taken a step backwards at this point in his career. But I think Villarreal are happy to get him out of the building, both because he earns big wages and because they don't want him around the group long term, given his kind of inflated aspirations, if you like. So a decent loan fee to bring in, I think, for a player they didn't want. Manu Morlanes has left permanently, 2.5 million. He goes to Mallorca. I'm actually quite excited to see what Morlanes does for Mallorca. I always thought that he'd be a long-term player for Villarreal, but it hasn't quite shaken out. Been on multiple loan spells and just hasn't quite worked for him at the Estadio de la Ceramica. A disappointing departure on a personal level, but I think on a broader level, like I said, we haven't seen the best of him, so it just makes sense for Villarreal to cash in and see what he can do down the line. And Ivan Martin as well falls into that exact same category. Really, 2 million he goes to Girona. Vicente Bora, he's left on a free. He joins Olympiacos. A fan favourite, I think. He brought in the limited time he had with the club, a really good leader, a pivotal part of the Europa League campaign and beyond. And yeah, for a player who played for Villarreal such a short time, I was out on loan, of course, last season as well. I think that it feels who have won over fans as quickly as him. And like I said, it's because he was a real leader and a good character in the dressing room. So he goes with the blessing of pretty much everyone in Villarreal. And yeah, it's a free transfer, but he's kind of past the level, dropped below the level rather than Villarreal at this point in his career. Johan Mojica goes for a loan fee to Osasuna, a loan deal rather. Again, a player who's dropped below the standards of Villarreal. I'm not sure he ever quite was Villarreal's standard of player. He was a decent backup to have at full back, but never really defensively sound. He arrived, of course, from Elche and remains part of the club, given he's on a loan deal. A good signing for Osasuna. I think he's around that level of player. I think he doesn't quite make the top six caliber player, but he's slot in nicely to a team from 7th to 12th, shall we say. And he can play some European football as well with Osasuna this year, given they've been allowed back into the Conference League. So I think that one will make sense for all parties. Ramon Terrats comes in. He's back at Villarreal from Girona. Spent last season on loan at Villarreal, initially joining the B team and breaking into the first team later on. And he put some real impressive performances in the middle of the park, an energetic player, and showed real flashes and showed more than someone like Manu Morlanes has. So I think a signing that really makes sense, and I think most fans wanted to see him back at the club. He helped the B team out again towards the end of the season when they were struggling towards fighting against relegation. So a decent signing and a good fee as well. One none of us really saw coming, Alexander Sorloth coming in from RB Leipzig. Spent a lot, of course, the last 2 years with Real Sociedad. He's the top scorer last season. I believe Villarreal wanted him this summer, but Villarreal have got him. A smart signing, I think. A very different kind of player to what Villarreal have had in the last few years. A real plan B and something the Yellows really haven't had. Of course, Villarreal are always going to play the type of football where they're resistant to sending the ball long into the box. They're always going to try and build up slowly and play with the ball across the floor. But there are times in football where you just need to go long, especially when you're chasing a game or if you're struggling to break a team down. At Villarreal often fall into that category of struggling to break teams down. And being able to just put that long ball in the boxes is a useful asset and something we just haven't done in the last couple of years because they haven't had that option. They haven't had any big, tall players who can consistently win headers. I think Gerard Moreno can, of course, win headers and score headers, but he's not the kind of player who's going to send the ball into the box too. And Sorloth certainly is a very powerful player in the air, a powerful player on the floor as well, for that matter. A strong player, physical, can score goals. He's not a natural goal scorer, I wouldn't say. Not someone who's going to score 20 plus goals in a season, but he will get you around 10, 12, 15, that kind of range. And he'll fill in the goals with Villarreal. I'll be missing them, I think, because across the last couple of years under Emery and Setien, there's tended to be kind of reluctance to go to a plan B and just to keep pounding at the door in the same kind of way. And sometimes it can be just way too predictable for teams to defend, and especially lower teams who obviously sit in a low block and keep Villarreal at bay. Sorloth can offer that something different, can get on the end of long balls, can get on the end of crosses, and failing that, he can just, even in Villarreal's usual system, he can hold the ball up well, bring others into play, and I think that'll be a really useful asset. And 10 million is an absolute steal for a striker of that caliber, so no complaints there from as far as Villarreal are concerned. I think it makes sense to do the outcome in first, actually. Samu Chukwueze, of course, went to AC Milan on a 20 million up front and 8 million euros in add-ons. This one's a question, I think, for Villarreal. Such a great player, Samu Chukwueze, of course. Struggled for consistency a little bit, but he's still young. Last year, I felt under Setien's system, he really found his composure, his scoring touch, his calmness in the final third. And not to the same level, of course, but in that way that Vinicius Junior learned to slow the game down in the final third, in the last phase of play. That was something that Chukwueze was struggling with. He was getting to the final third and panicking, trying to take players on a little bit too much. But last season, he kind of found that composure in the final third. And yeah, it's just a disappointing one for Villarreal. And obviously another player along with Torres and Nicolas Jackson is another big blow, another big departure. And of course, it's a cheap deal because he was allowed to run into the final year of his contract, which was a little bit of an error for Villarreal are concerned, and AC Milan have taken full advantage. A deal worth up to 28 is not the worst if Villarreal do get those add-ons. I think Chukwueze will perform well in Serie A. But if a Premier League team were interested, for example, this is a deal that would have been 40 million or above, I believe. So a disappointing one. And Sam was going to be difficult to replace, I think. We'll come on to the needs of the team in a little bit, but I think that is one of the ones that Villarreal will feel more than most, I think, in terms of departures. And lastly, but not least, Matteo Gabbia arrives on a loan deal, perhaps as a bit of a sweetener to that Chukwueze deal. He came through the AC Milan academy and has played a fair bit. Still a young player. Um, we spoke to an AC Milan expert recently on Villarreal USA, and you can check that article out to get a better feel for the type of player Gabbia is. And what we were told was that he's more of an old-fashioned centre-back, perhaps in the way that Raul Albiol is, more physical. Um, and yeah, I don't mind that. Obviously, Villarreal don't need someone who can play with the ball as well at the back, and I think he's a decent player on the ball, but I don't mind that kind of robust centre-back. And from what we've heard, it looks like Villarreal may have a chance of signing him permanently at the end of the season, given the way that AC Milan have strengthened at centre-back and how he's not failed to impress. I don't think, but not quite living up to the growing standards, because Milan are a team on the rise. Of course, some title success in the last couple of years, and also reaching the semi-finals of the Champions League last season. So um, not quite that caliber of player yet, but he seems like a player who can compete well for a centre-back starting role at Villarreal. And of course, there seems to be some potential there for a permanent deal down the line. So one positive perhaps to the Chukwueze deal, as far as Villarreal are concerned, perhaps they wouldn't have looked at Milan's squad for the kind of fringe players if Chukwueze wasn't in talks at the time. And it seems like that's the way the deal went down. As far as Villarreal are concerned for the rest of the summer transfer window, a real lack of incomings when you consider the quality of players that Villarreal have lost this summer. Some smart deals, like I said, with Comisania, Sorloth, Brereton-Diaz, but I think some areas are seriously lacking in quality. Certainly the goalkeeper position, of course, Pepe Reina and Filip Jorgensen, they're battling out for the starter role for the first week of the season, and that doesn't fill anyone with optimism. Villarreal need a goalkeeper. I don't quite understand why they're not just pulling the trigger on Dominik Livakovic, who seems to be the number one target, and it costs somewhere around 10, 11, 12 million euros. But Villarreal resistant to paying it at the moment, despite the fact they made a huge profit this summer on incomings. And if it's not going to be him, fine, but Villarreal need to sign some sort of goalkeeper before the end of the summer transfer window. Pepe Reina didn't convince last season. Jorgensen seems to be a decent keeper, but not a starting keeper for a top six, hopefully a top four challenging team. So Villarreal certainly need to strengthen in that department. Long term, I think they need to sign a centre back. Gabby is a good start, but Villarreal is short at that area. Raul Albiol is moving into what will probably be his last season at this stage. Issa Mandi got better last season, but is aging and never totally convinced. Still hasn't totally convinced, I should say. Jorge Cuenca looks promising, but it's a little bit rash at this stage. Still not quite showing signs of a player of kind of Pau Torres quality or that kind of level of player. So Villarreal need to plan long term at centre back as well. I think that the Yellows are okay up front between Ben Brereton-Diaz, Gerard Moreno, and Jose Luis Morales, or although arguably and Sorloth, of course. Though a couple of those players are better out on the wing, but can still play up top. I think another winger would be a smart signing, given the loss of Samuel Chukwueze, and we don't know what the future will hold for Yeremy Pino. There's some talk of Villarreal being in for Abde from Barcelona, but we'll see how that pans out. I think Setien, given the kind of attacking coach that he is, would like to sign a winger at some point before the end of the window, and we may even see another centre midfielder come in as well. Given, like I said, there are some aging players in that kind of area with between Capu, Parejo, Trigueros, so perhaps a centre midfielder at some point, although maybe we're asking too much at this stage given the lack of incomings we've seen across the summer. So we'll keep an eye on that. Of course, we'll have all the latest news on Villarreal USA. And like I said, plenty more video content to come. I won't always be on my own, I hope. We'll get some of the team involved in this, and some special guests as well from different teams or experts on different players and that kind of thing as the summer goes on or the season goes on. So keep an eye out for those kind of videos down the line. Hopefully this has been a productive first go at it. Like I said, we'll have mini videos as well on the Twitter, just to kind of recap games and short topics, and then we'll dive into more longer term topics on the YouTube channel where we've got kind of more space to explore. So thanks for joining me. I've been Jamie Campbell, and this has been the Villarreal update by Villarreal USA, and we'll catch you soon as the new season approaches.